Welcome to the Hunter's Campfire. G'day, my name is Mark van den Bogart, hunter, fisherman, writer and storyteller. With me is Ian Hurley, technologist, hunter, hunting mentor and proud father. Together we want to help you get hunting. Our focus is helping you make the most of public land hunting right here in Australia, even if you don't live in a state where it's offered. This podcast series is all about helping you get started, helping you build your knowledge and your confidence so you can get out there and live your own hunting adventures. Now, let's get started. Okay, so here we go. This one's probably my nicest one. It's hard to say. It's hard to rate them. But this particular, so they're all Flintlock pistols, Annie. I always talk about Flintlock pistols. This particular one is really, really interesting. Well, they're all really interesting. Okay, so we have a Flintlock pistol here. Now, a couple of really interesting things about this one. This is a Wilkinson, as in, you know, the razor blades. It's a Henry Wilkinson. Sorry, no, it's a James Wilkinson. It's actually before Henry. James Wilkinson. So people don't realise that before Wilkinson swords made razor blades, they made pistols. And the reason they made pistols was because the person who started the company was actually a guy called Henry Knock, who's, again, one of those famous names that you should know about, Ian. Henry Knock is invented a lot of the things that we take for granted now in pistol technology. So he was a real technologist. He made some very interesting guns, and when he passed away, by marriage, a relation of his, James Wilkinson, took over, and James was the person who started the progression from Wilkinson pistols to Wilkinson swords, as it were. So this is our Wilkinson pistol. It's a flintlock. It's got what's called a fishtail grip. So you can see it's a very different grip. London made, captured ram, which so this thing's actually like captured in there, so you can't drop it, which is quite a nifty little process. But what is really interesting about this one, and I'll get that ram in, is that this barrel is marked with a number, and they actually recorded this barrel in a book. So this barrel went into a book on the 24th of June 1815. You can actually track it down to when that barrel was entered into the book. And the fact that the barrel was entered in the book and the gun wasn't probably means that they built this for retail. So this wasn't a commission piece. This was going to sit in a shop, and some, you know, up-and-coming young gentleman who needed a pistol for whatever reason. Probably this came as a brace. It came with the second pistol in a box, bought this and probably another pistol and the accessories, and this is what remains of that one. So we actually know the day that that particular barrel, someone picked it up and signed it off in a book, which is, if you think about it, what's it, 1815? So, yeah, 206 years ago, someone wrote some details about that particular pistol. Very big bore, like most flintlocks. Slow, heavy, and full of lead is generally the way that they worked. Yeah, you know, ballistics were about blunt force energy rather than anything that we know about ballistics today. Smooth bore, so it rattled down there. It's a flintlock. The amazing thing about this particular lock, when you get behind, it's actually a really quite a, it's not intricate by our standards of technology, but there is a lot of work and a lot of fitting into that. Got some really great, you know, brass fittings, some great engraving in it. It's a real piece, that one. I have seen a set with a very similar pistol as a brace, which is two pistols. But I don't know where this one's, you know, brother or sister or whatever you want to call that is laying. Maybe it's broken. Maybe it's part of someone else's collection somewhere else. So
there's no collector's database of such around there that you could be able to put that barrel number in and located?
The fact that the barrel number is not related to a pistol means that it wouldn't have been sold to an individual, which means the name didn't get entered. So it was made and they probably went, okay, we're going to stick this in the shop window. So if it was a commission piece, we'd be able to actually, if we could, track down the who actually commissioned it. So if you look at Manton, which is probably the most famous name, they've got mostly books of, I've got one of the books, one of the Manton books, and you can actually look it up and you can find out who commissioned it, because the number, nearly all their pieces were commissioned, so you can actually trace it back down, which is pretty amazing, And at that time, it was mostly guys going to India or going into the subcontinent or somewhere like that, and they were asking to be fitted out. And so pistols, rifle, sword, and accoutrements, and away you went. So that's a nice
Amazing history.
It is.
Do I dare ask what these sorts of pieces are worth, or do I leave that alone?
As my wife may be watching this one day, we'll kind
of
skim over that one if we can.
Yep, no, that's fine. All right, well, we'll move on. And
let's move on from that.
Let's move on. We don't want to encourage your wife to understand how much you're spending on pistols that you'll never fire.
It's an investment. It's an investment.
Yeah.
No, it's kind of like excellent art. It's kind of like cool art.
Very cool art.
It's very cool art.
All right. Well, we'll kick off this episode. So we're going to do something a little bit different. We've spoken about forests. We've spoken about gear. We've spoken about getting out and about as Queenslanders, trying to figure out where to go hunting and how to go hunting and those sorts of things. And we'll continue doing that. But as we've sat around, or I've sat around a number of campfires over the last, I don't know, decade or so, at least half of those has been with our guest tonight, who is Andrew Day. So welcome to the podcast, Andrew. It's great to have you on board.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to get here. So the reason I've invited Andrew to come along today is to talk about a lot of the mental health aspects of the great outdoors, of hunting, of the pursuits that we all cherish. And I think it's a really good time right now to be talking about it, given so many of our friends in the hunting industry are locked up and hiding from COVID or being told they can't get out and about, and mental health is a real issue right now. We're talking about it a lot at my work, and it's certainly top of mind with all of our teams that we look after and things like that. So it was a good opportunity to really extend on that and dig into a little bit of the detail around what it means to us and why we get out there and do it. And who knows where this conversation will go. It's a very interesting one. So thanks again, Andy, for coming along. And like with all of our guests, I guess the best place to start is all about you. You'll get the spotlight for a few minutes, and then it'd be great to hear about, the bit about your work life and your out of work life, your connection into hunting, and we're ADA members, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's listening as an ADA member, but certainly some of those the benefits of being part of a group like that worth hearing about.
So I guess I'll just start at the beginning. I am employed by Queensland Health as a psychologist and a team leader, and like you say, the current climate and the impact on mental health across the board is becoming more noticeable. I wasn't always into psychology for work. In a previous life, I was in the military, and before that, I did quite a few other, lower complex sort of positions around my local community, so nothing too serious. But in the end, when I left school, I was hell-bent on getting some life experience with a view to enlisting in the military, specifically to get a second language. That's where I wanted to go. It's where my main interests lie. And I had always harboured an interest in psychology as a profession, but didn't really understand what that might entail. So I pursued my first interest, which was getting a second language and getting deployed across the greater world there to find out what goes on in other countries. And when I transitioned after 10 years back to civilian life, like that transition for me was pretty good. And I stepped straight into a number of different roles in my working life there that I enjoyed more than my pre-military working life. So I did some personal training. I was working at the Department of Child Safety. I worked in the mental health industry and did that while I was completing my university studies, and eventually picked up some work with Queensland Health and private practice, and I've not really looked back on that. But to keep it more relevant to tonight, like how I came to find myself interested in hunting. I grew up in the country, lower socioeconomic situation. We did hunt for some of our food periodically, and that was really good. We grew a lot of our own food. We harvested our own animals on the property, and that was interesting. Difficult at times, as a young person to realise that you're kind of not eating the same things as everybody else. But I reflect on that time now as being quite influential on my take now. I didn't always hunt with a bow, but I did pick up a bow in my mid-teens and really enjoyed that because it was harder. I think most people can learn to shoot a rifle fairly easily and get reasonable accuracy without getting too technical or shooting at great distances. And I found the physical element of the archery to be pretty interesting. But like most teenagers, I drifted away from that and ended up doing lots of other things. And when I discharged from the army, I went back to it. And I went back to it with just the idea that I would just see how it felt to pick up a bow again and see what that's like. What I discovered though, with my education being somewhat improved after completing a degree or two, and my experience of the military, was that the two went together really well. So I found using the physical element of archery and the mind game that comes with shooting well really good for me. And so when I then pursued taking the archery from a target situation to a hunting situation to go back to where I came from, that experience really brought home to me the benefits of spending time deliberately with intent, as I say to Ian, walking with intent in nature gives you something that you don't get elsewhere. And I've really enjoyed that process. I'm a better person because of that. And it's not because I'm out there shooting animals every other day. In fact, I don't often shoot animals. You talk to Ian, when we go hunting, I'm saying, well, like, I don't have to do the shooting. I want to be part of the eating though. That part's really awesome. But for me, that sense of connection that comes with the total package that hunting gives us, that's where the action is, to feel better and to perform better and to have better brain function and to be more emotionally together than I was without it. And I think that's what it comes down to for me. So I've done a lot of reading about it because it's a firm area of interest these days. So I feel like I'm more well educated on why that's so. But yeah, that's where I come from. And it's better done with others. Sure, there is definitely space for hunting on your own. It does give you something unique. But hunting with others as part of a club or a small group or friends, actually that's much better for us, I think. And I enjoy that process of sharing it with other people more than I do hunting on my own. So being part of the club is great. How's that sound?
Very good. Yeah.
Bit of information in there, fellas.
I've got so many questions. I've got
Away, Mark.
questions.
Hopefully I have some answers.
Look, there was a couple of things there that you said that resonated. The way you described them, this idea of hunt, with intent.
Yep.
I think one of the most difficult things that we have as hunters to communicate to someone who doesn't hunt is the idea that you are in nature with intent.
Yes.
You are not a tourist.
No.
But
you're not shopping.
You're not shopping. You're not a tourist.
Not browsing.
There's this. I don't know what it is, and I don't know how far it goes back, and I don't know which part of the brain it turns on, but there is a sense of intent that you do not get from other activity.
Okay.
And I don't know if the fact it's because it's so serious. And this is something I've wondered about with fishing. For instance, fishing has moved to very much a catch and release model, and if you look at fishing, I think anyway, it's become much more of a sport and a participatory sport. The way it's packaged, the way it's all, they have fishing competitions, it's all about catch and release. And I sometimes wonder if they lost what the intent of fishing was in the first place by turning it into that kind of activity. With hunting, there is no catch and release here. No. We can't do that. And I always wonder if the intent and the driver of that intent comes from the fact that this is such a serious business. So what do you think about that?
A lot. I think a lot about that. So it's interesting to hear you hone in straight away on which part of the brain does this affect. And is it because it's serious that we have this thing called intent? So is it okay if we unpack that?
But let's unpack. I think we just need to have a clock here because this could go for some time.
Last time I did this, I went for an hour and a half and I barely scratched the surface. Like, it's a big topic.
This is
so just to give you an idea. So, Mark, I read a lot and I've covered the brain function part of hunting better now in the last 18 months than I had previously. So now I feel like I've got at least an idea, but I've scratched the surface only. It's complicated and I won't have all the answers. The last thing I picked up to read about this, I had the book in my possession for 6 weeks and I got through 80 pages with a dictionary to help me understand what. What's he saying? But I can do a good summary. So the interesting point you said, which part of the brain is this about? Actually, it's all of it. And that's why it's good. So I want to bring a term in. It's called lateralization. And that is the switching between sides of your brain, the left and the right side. And a well-lateralized brain is better for us. It's quicker, it's more efficient, we make better decisions, it's better. So some people with some learning difficulties, they often have a less well-lateralized brain. So that means it's a good separation. One side does a function better than the other, and that's great. But for some people, there's competition between, so the switching and the pathways aren't as neat. Hunting amplifies that lateralization, and it gives us a method to slow down our emotional responses, which occurs mainly on the right side, and engages that right side in its functional best, doing nature, looking at the big picture. So talk to me. When you go hunting, you scan, you look, you're taking in information with your vision, all of your senses, your hearing, your sense of smell, all of it, that's really engaging. But how that switching occurs between the right side and the left side is really important, especially when you're hunting. So the bigger picture is taken in by the right, the finer detail is processed by the left. But when we get emotional outside of that hunting situation, our emotion is generally on that right side and it can confuse us, stop us from performing, gets in the way of making good decisions. And the modern sort of world that we're living in, it's really charged with heightening our anxiety levels, giving us a high levels of anger. All of that stuff stops us from having that good separation between the left and the right. So you ever said something when you're angry that you didn't really mean? Well, that's everybody, because that's what we do. That's because the right side is... Yeah, that's right. That's because the right side's really bossing us around at that point. We need a bit of left influence. But the left side, it has less emotion. It's analytical. It takes what we've already learned and processes that. It's slower. So it has a real place. but more so in the modern world, it is becoming more and more dominant in our everyday. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on in our brain that gets in the way of us really enjoying our normal everyday life. What hunting does, from what I understand, is it actually engages our brain as it's meant to be engaged for that period of time we're hunting. And so it gives the right side its proper job. It allows room then for the left side to do its proper job, and it actually all comes together really neatly. Does that make sense so far?
Look, that makes so much sense that it's actually, you know, I think we need to package that up. That is so, you know, because I mean, like you say a lot of things when you describe hunting, and the linkage between what you just said and those kind of things. Like, for instance, I reckon when you go hunting, it takes like a day to get the city out of you.
There's actually research to say it's a 3-day effect. After 3 days, you're home and hosed. You're in the clear. The city's gone.
Well, it's because, you know, so it takes some time for your nose to start working again, for your hearing to start being, you know, to function properly. The old joke was, you know, on the first day the animals, you know, they bolt as soon as you approach. The second day they're a bit wary. The third day they actually walk up to you. You know, you seem to. It takes a period of time to immerse yourself, and maybe it's not immersing yourself, for you to be immersed.
Yep.
That's it. For all these things to line up and fire properly. It's quite possibly, you know, that's a great way of describing it. The fact that, you know, you're using this idea of lateralization, where you're saying it all comes together, because you know that you hunt. You know, like people talk about hunt, for instance, I think I mentioned it last week, you know, I hunted a particular block for 3 months. In reality, I hunted that block for about 45 seconds. The 3 months was just preparing me for that 45 seconds where it all came down. And even then, it probably was shorter than 45 seconds. That compression of everything into that time and that energy came to that point. And I suppose at that point, it would have been interesting to be, you know, dragging an ECG around. And that'd be an interesting thing, wouldn't it? Having an ECG on you when you see the animal. What happens then? Actually, you know, what happens then?
Now that you mentioned that, getting some, what they call an fMRI, the functional magnetic resonated image, if you could do that, that'd be bloody awesome. So what you said was actually really, really good to hear. So what I hear you say there is that as a hunter, you put effort and time and planning and organization and resource into achieving a certain outcome. So what I say is hunters are organized. Hunters make plans. Hunters look to the future. Hunters review their actions. Hunters spend time making sure their gear works. They practice, they get skilled, they use all of those higher order thinking functions with a deliberate intent to go and spend time in nature.
It is, and it's funny that all that effort, I mean, from a monetary point of view, you know, you would never hunt. You know, that deer in the fridge is like about $6,000 a kilo, surely.
I agree not to talk about money. All right.
That's right. But the interesting thing is, whilst you do that, and that's true, you know, your gear, your range time, all of that thing. And if you're not successful, it doesn't have, you know, you could be in a different kind of, if you put that much info, say, if you invested that much time and money into a share investment that didn't pay off, you'd be probably, you know, you'd be chewing your cud for a long, long time. You speak to a hunter who's done all that, and they go, yeah, mate, sorry, animal, just didn't pull the trigger.
Correct.
And it's not like, and it's so the effort, I think, is what's really interesting here, is all that effort and all that higher order, and it's true, it's high order practice. I mean, doesn't necessarily have to equate to an outcome. And I read today, actually, now I think about, there's something in the on the ABC, and it's only a headline. I haven't read the whole story, but they're talking about one of the the athletes who said, I trained for 4 years and I lost it all in 6 minutes and how much that hurt. You don't actually hear hunters saying that.
No. So this is an interesting thing that is actually a real pet topic of mine. You don't have to get an animal to succeed at hunting. Actually, often, and in my case with the bow, I have more time getting close to an animal and not even knocking an arrow because it's just not the right thing to do for that moment in time, or I don't see anything, but I get the benefits of all of the other stuff that goes along with it. So thinking back, like there's another element to this, and that's your progression as a hunter over your lifetime. So if you think back to what it was like hunting when you were younger, you were desperate to get an animal and you were crappy or you were frustrated that you didn't get the animal. That changes. With time and experience and practice of what hunting really is, it doesn't matter. You don't have to get an animal to have a successful hunt or the benefits of hunting. Mostly, the best hunts I've been on are ones where I didn't get the chance. In fact, some of the funniest stories are the times where things have gone haywire with the luck element that hunting also has. And that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. There is that, I don't know, as you said, is the progression of the individual as a hunter. Interestingly, I didn't hunt till I was in my late teens, early 20s, because I didn't come from that environment. So I didn't come, it wasn't a part of my life. So, and I've only been a member of the ADA for just over 10 years. So deer haven't been a big, before that it was, pigs it's pigs. So that progression has been, I don't know, I don't necessarily think that progression is time-based. I think it's experience-based. I think you could get to that point. I don't think you have to be 50 to get to that point. You could, it's about the experience that you have and the type of hunting you do. Certainly, you would assume that if hunting for you was basically, and not to say there's anything wrong with it, but if hunting for you was, spotlight rabbits or roos or deer or whatever it is, you're going to have a different approach to hunting than someone who, is hunting during the day, is hunting areas that they don't quite understand or they're learning. And so the challenge of that part, I think, is really important, which of course gets down to the value of public land hunting, because public land hunting is roll of the dice.
Yes, that's right. And it's interesting that in what you've just said, that like there's part of me that goes, but hunting at night with a torch or a spotlight or whatever, well, that's shooting to me. Like you're going shooting. And for me, there's a line between that and hunting in the way that I do hunting. And I'm not saying this is elitist and we should change terminology, but for the meaning of what I like to do, it's totally different to that. So it's this other thing that I put into a basket that says, if I'm going hunting, it's with the intent of putting something in the freezer for me to eat, and I'm going to do it as, within this way. I would normally class things like spotlighting as actually, well, that's shooting, because really you're not really hunting, you're just kind of driving around and you're using a torch and you shoot stuff. But that's probably just being a bit flippant or blasé, and I don't want to undermine or take away what other people do. That's fine. And that's what other people do in that space. That's their decision to make and how they want to talk about it. Like you say, it's a different perspective. Perfectly fine too. But for me, that part about it that brings with it the complexity of the activity is primarily about the mindfulness approach to getting the benefit regardless of whether I get an animal.
Look, this idea about, I think we should really talk more about this idea of mindfulness, because and this idea is you're not talking about a remedial activity, you're actually talking about a growth activity. So you're not talking about if you've got a problem, take up hunting. What you're saying is, if you want to grow, this is an opportunity for you to grow as a person. It's not about catching up, it's about leapfrog, bounding forward. And I think and mindfulness and the associated approaches that I think are very important here, because that's what to me it sounds like you're saying is this actually kind of makes you better. It doesn't.
Yeah, it makes you a better person
As in
lots
from
of ways.
a point of no, you're not sick. This is how you get better. No, this is you're saying you're good. This is how you get better from good.
Yeah, that's right. So, before I said people who go hunting, they are skilled, they practice, they get organized, they make plans, they look to the future. That's about growth. That's about changing what you're doing or adding to what you're doing to make a goal realized. So goal setting, planning, looking to the future, they're all actions people take when they want to get through difficulty. You could be having difficulties in your life. It doesn't make you mentally unwell or struggling with your mental health. Your life is complicated. And we benefit as a species from doing this activity because it helps us get perspective, it helps us clarify our thinking, it helps us manage our emotion, and it certainly helps us with that higher order function that we often don't get time to do for ourselves in the modern life. We spend a lot of time making plans for work, making plans for family, making plans for others, and spending all of that time, but actually we're missing that part that's for us. And particularly for blokes in the modern society, we don't get a lot of time where having emotion is allowed, having emotion and having other men help you with that emotion is possible. When you go hunting, that happens. You're going to have that moment in time where you feel frustrated and your blokes around you are going to give you a hard time for stuffing it up, making you feel a little bit humbled, bringing you back to earth because you just did something really awesome. Like all of that engagement is really positive for us. You said before, just to add, I don't want to miss one point, you talked about progression and time and experience. That's a pretty interesting topic there that I want to come back to at some point about younger hunters and older hunters sharing their space, mentoring, and how much benefit that is for younger men.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with you. And the only thing I'd add to that, the plus would be the benefit it is to older men.
Of course.
It's a mutually beneficial. And look, I've had the opportunity over the last few years to take my son hunting, and I know that created, and I've got two boys, and it's my eldest. I haven't had my youngest hasn't come with us yet. He's not ready. He doesn't. So we're not pushing it. It's not like a a family command, but I'm letting him come to it. My eldest son has come to it a lot earlier, or with a lot more enthusiasm. But I know that when that happened, if you look at the progression of my hunting, that's a generational or fundamental change in my aspect the day that my son came with me. And on a fundamental level, there was a change in my aspect. And I know from that point on, how I viewed hunting became very, very different. Simply because there was there was this, I don't know, I'm not sure if it's rite of passage, if it's engagement, if it's purely a learning environment, safety aspect around it, the fact that you're doing something serious. Maybe it's all of those things combined together, and maybe it is that kind of that reptilian part of our brain that says this is something that has happened for a very, very long time, and you're now part of that. I'm not sure if that's there, but certainly I think there's a great value for everyone to have a combination of legacy or mentoring or coaching or whatever you want to call it within the hunting community. It's fundamental.
I think you go in.
A step in the middle of that as well. Like I think you've almost leapfrogged one part of it just because of the way things happened there with your son. But the way I looked at it changed completely when I started mentoring others. And this was through the ADA and taking new hunters and being part of that planning and testing and shaping of that person into taking their first animal. Changed the way that I looked at hunting completely, and more often than not now I'm more than happy to just let that happen and be in the background. Every now and then I'll get overly excited and I'll take over and I'll shoot anyway, but that's by the by. But and my young fella, he's 3, so he's come along to a hunter's camp or two now, just to participate in that. Not really the hunting side of it yet, because he's very young, but I can see that my aspect will change completely when it's a generational handover of information that is quite different to mentoring someone that's in the club. So there's 3 stages for me.
There's certainly, and with my son, so my boy's only 8, so he hasn't actually hunted yet, but he has been on active hunts. So, so the next progression will be to actually move towards that skill-based approach for him. But at the moment, and for the time being anyway, because I'm in no rush to develop this, this is really going to go at his own pace, is that you're right, there's these kind of tumblers or building blocks that, or gates that open up as you progress along. And the big gate for me was, him coming along and being there when I took my first animal. And when I think about it, the way that actually happened was fishing led to hunting. So the concept that fishing equated to an animal being prepared for food was pretty much a part of their life pretty early on. There was no mistaking of the progression from animal to food. So hunting then became, because some of the criticisms is how can a child handle that kind of seeing that, and well, in a lot of parts of the world, a child of my age is the guy doing it. He's not handling it, not viewing it. They're the ones, they're the ones doing it. So there's and I remember there's a famous drawing of basically not much more than toddlers in Inuit community with a piece of whale blubber in their mouths, and they're sawing at it with their own knives, and they're 2 to 3 years old. They're feeding themselves. That's how they're feeding themselves, rather than a spoon with in a bowl with cartoon characters on it. They're sitting there with a bit of whale blubber and a knife, and they're feeding themselves. So
we're not all that bad. My son will chew on a tomahawk steak without a cartoon bowl. That's all right. But Andy, how, if that then, you talk about the kids that are coming into this, how important is it that they're getting those connections into early hunting or early outdoors in their development and growth? Because they're stuck on couches. The family of the past is not the same as it used to be with modern living.
That's right.
How's that?
So look, there is shed loads of research out there that supports all of the things that you guys just said. Genuine, hardcore research. My own experience of looking at that information is that we are well and truly disconnected from where our food comes from, and that's partly the reason we have such opposition to things like hunting or taking animals like fish for food. Actually, like you guys, my 2 daughters have helped me process deer on the kitchen bench, 3 and 6 years old at the time, and getting in there and actually removing cuts from the carcass and talking about when we're going to eat that. That whole process of being reconnected to where our food really does come from, that has a lot of value, not just for their development, but also for what the value the food has. So I've talked about this before in other settings, that we eat less meat as a consequence to my hunting, not because I don't take animals, but because the value of that has more value. So I'm going to eat less of it to make it go further, and I have more appreciation for the effort that it takes to get that from the paddock to the plate for my family. The other thing that you kind of touched on briefly about how that progression and handing over of information between, younger members of your family and the older members of the family, and there's that progression, that change, that maturing and growth of a young person to an adult, and then like that passage of information. There's some interesting research about how we function when we're doing that activity with others. So, and just to hark back to the brain connection part, and that's why, and I'll get back to the direct question you asked there, Ian, about how that's important for children and that progression. So when we engage in the activity of providing for others, that actually makes us have a higher level of empathy. And so in a modern society, managing empathy is actually really important. If you don't do empathy well, you either have too much of it and you make emotional decisions left, right, and center and end up in a world of confusion, or you don't have enough and everyone thinks you're quite hard-nosed. So having a level of understanding that provision of food through activity together for others actually manages our emotion and our ability to have good, manageable, reasonable empathy because there's a purpose to it. It actually makes sense. So there's research in America where they're using First Nations people's approach to living to help violent offenders. So they're giving people an opportunity to live as they were in a Native American tribe where they have to go and get their food, they have to get their wood organised for a fire, they have to cut it, they have to source it, they have to provide for others in their small community. Those people have lower rates of recidivism, which is reoffending rates, and in the long term, and the outcomes stick. So there's a lot of interesting research about the positive effects on how we think about ourselves and how we engage with others in that provision of food or joint activity to get resources for our family, which is sounding very tribal, but that's what that's about. So in the development of a child, being exposed to getting organised, making plans, learning to use your eyeballs properly in a natural environment, learning to use all of your senses, learning what that smell is, learning which parts of the creek is better to take water from, learning all of that physical nature activity, that's what our brains really need to develop well. Does that sound okay? Like that makes sense? So as a young child, if you've got someone who is skilled at that, guiding you, not telling you how to do it, but giving you opportunity to do it for yourself, that's actually really important. It teaches safe risk-taking. It teaches experimentation and tactile engagement with our environment that you can't really replace with a TV. So when you put it all together, what we're talking about sounds like to me, get your gear organised, take your kids, give them an opportunity to engage in the environment, get food organised, understand where that comes from, and value it for what it is. Dinner, food, not something that's put their restaurant quality every single time like they do on the telly. Like that, there's a lot to be said about how those things go together and how what we're seeing on the like on a screen regularly isn't really reflected in what life's actually like for the majority.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. The whole, it's actually quite challenging in a lot of ways. I think the fact that this whole focus on food as an outcome rather than the process of, so the various cooking shows and the overemphasis on the presentation and the cooking rather than where that came from. It's almost like it almost becomes magical. There's just these wonderful ingredients and there's just all these things, and so you have this ability to create and create and create, and voila, there it is. So there's the greatest whatever it is in the world.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's really awesome. That's great. That's totally amazing. And not every meal has to be that. Food's about sustenance.
and there's that, to a point where it's a competition. But to kind of throw it back the other way, if you think about one of the things that people who talk about the benefits of hunting and the historical content of hunting talk about, the cave art, the fact that one of the first or the oldest cave art we have is of hunting. And you can argue that art in itself is probably one of the earliest expressions of a species move beyond worrying about today. You can't draw and create if you're worried about your existence in the next 12 hours. You have to have an ability to kind of have the brain function that allows you to focus beyond today to be in the right place where you want to start creating art. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can't have self-actualization if you're worried about your food. So you have to be in a species has to be in a certain developmental phase before it starts to create art. So art's actually a pretty good indicator of the species development. The interesting thing is the art that exists in cave art is not of eating. It's not a fireplace with 12, 15 people sitting around it eating an animal. It's about the pursuit of that animal and how that was far more important than the consumption of that animal. And I think that's a really interesting, I always think about that, you don't see cave art of someone eating, you see cave art of someone pursuing food.
Too many gardeners.
That's right.
Just throwing that out there.
That's right.
No pictures of salad on that there wall.
That's right. Well, even if there was salad, what it would be, you would assume that would be the harvesting of salad, not not the tossing of salad. It's not like that's it. It's about the fact that there was a harvesting or the gathering. You're a hunter gatherer. You weren't a presentation specialist.
That's right.
And I think that's really important. That one of the challenges I think of modern life. And I think one of the things that hunting answers that challenge so well is that we do have food has become it's a bit of a pastime. It's so readily available. We don't really worry about it at all. What we worry about now is the quality and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's become less important. And what hunting teaches you is that, I know this from personal experience from 2 weekends ago, carrying that deer out took some effort.
It does. But it's good effort, right?
That's right. And there is literally a video of me falling over, and I hit the ground and I just kind of go, oh, well, that's it, up you get.
Interestingly, when you were doing that complex activity of getting organized and getting your deer and then having to carry the sucker out again, did you have a thought at any point during that carry out, gee, I should do some more exercise?
I often do. No, I didn't. There was other things on my mind, but I didn't think, gee, I should be,
brain function was slowly, falling apart as you were exerting.
Yeah, I didn't think about. I didn't question my fitness. I questioned I questioned a lot of things, but I didn't question my fitness. I questioned
why you didn't shoot one by the truck. Yeah,
that's right. Why didn't I tip one out of camp? That might have been a question, but I didn't question my fitness. I must admit there was a lot of things that were going in my mind, but I was far too much in the space to actually worry about anything other than what the space I was in. Because it wasn't an easy carry.
That's what I want to hear. Yeah. Did you hear what you just said?
Yeah,
I was right there. I was right then. That's what hunting gives you.
Look, and where I first really started to become aware of that was when I got back into fishing with a very good mate in my late 20s, I think I was. We got into he was new to Queensland. We were working together. He was a very keen fisher. I had fished, but I hadn't fished for a while. And we got into fishing on Friday evenings down on the Gold Coast Seaway on the rock wall. And we would be there for like 6 hours. And you wouldn't know it was 6 hours until you realise the tide had gone out. So, the physical environment had changed. And people would say, how do you stand there for 6 hours? Don't you get bored? And I the answer was, not even boredom doesn't even get close to existing. The concentration that went down that leader line into the water was absolute, and you don't do that. There was no part of my job where for 6 hours I was completely focused on the subtle movement of a fishing line.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because that's actually a really good entryway into what these activities do for mindfulness. So we bandied the term about mindfulness this, mindfulness that. What is it? So for my interpretation and how I run mindfulness for me, It's about giving your brain the opportunity to see what it's doing, to become aware of what it does, and to act accordingly. So not getting stuck in the past, not thinking about the future, but just letting your brain do what it's meant to do for right now and maintaining headway on that. So if you think about when you go hunting and you go stalking for an animal, you are using your vision, you're scanning, you're filling that part of your brain up with activity. You're using your sense of smell, your sense of hearing, and all of your sense of touch. So all of that is coming into play. Separate to that is you are walking with that intent, and I'm using the word slightly differently here, the intentional movement of your body. So you must be aware of where you're putting your feet, whether or not you're going to flap your arm and swat a fly or you're going to keep it really still, whether or not you're going to turn your head fast or slow to take a beat on a new angle, because that movement, sense of movement, and animals see movement above everything else, like all of that comes into play. So you must pay attention. So your ability to maintain attention over a long time frame actually takes a degree of mindfulness that you don't get from meditation. The moment you find yourself drifting and thinking about something else is the moment you should have been paying attention, because that's when the deer nick off. So I was hunting with Ian just a little while ago, and there was a few of us. I had a moment probably 20 minutes beforehand where the hunting felt awesome. There was 4 of us. Everyone was super quiet. We're all on tune. Somehow in the next 20-minute period, I had about 30 seconds where I goofed off with one of the other hunters, and that rammed home the same lesson. Actually, I should have just reined in that impulse and really used that as a warning sign, because usually when that goes on, it's when the deer are just there, and they were, and I missed them. And I don't miss them normally, and it really irked me. So that idea of immediate feedback on your mindfulness has real value. You don't get that if you sit down meditating, trying to do mindfulness separately. So the power of the complex activity that comes with hunting as a mindfulness delivery platform, I think, is very difficult to beat.
Yeah,
of course.
The big guy, 15 meters behind Andy, puffing and panting, following him up the hill, showed Andy the deer that he just walked past, which I thought was quite funny.
Which was a new experience for me, because that doesn't happen. I was like, oh my God, here it is.
We've been on other trips where, we're sitting calmly under a tree just waiting for things to happen, and you've probably been watching a deer for 10 minutes and I didn't even know it was there. I remember some of those.
That's certainly an interesting aspect of it, where I think about this a lot, because I often hunt with a mate, so there is that pairing up, and you will see something and it will, there it is, and you cannot explain to the other person where this thing is. It's just like, it's and it's not geographical. It's not like, you can explain it geographically, but that is not the issue. The issue is not it's not a geographic challenge. It must be something to do with where your head is at. It must be something, because you can say it's 10 meters in front of you. You basically give them a GPS coordinate where it is, but they cannot see it. But it is there, illuminated in front of you. And there's other times, when you're hunting, and you recall some kind of input or learning, and you go and you almost lead off on that without thinking about it, and it produces a result. And I'll give you an example of that. 2 weeks ago, we were crossing a little meadow that drained. It was basically drained into a dam that we found on this property, and there was like a ragweed that was about somewhere between knee and waist high. And we were walking through this ragweed, and this voice of Ian said, "Fallow like native timber." And I turned to the native timber, and that's where I missed that buck.
Yep.
I looked up and went, fallow like native timber. And sure enough, I walked into that native timber. So I was going through this ragweed and there was a native timber stand. I turned that stand. That's where the fallow was. They were there and I missed them.
But you learned.
Got one about an hour later, but that's what it was. It was like, there was this thing that said fallow like native timber, you know, and it was just this. I went, and I didn't even kind of think, it wasn't like this voice told me that it was just like my brain said fallow like native timber. Turn to native timber and there was the fallow. And you get that all the time. You get this kind of input or recoil that says do this, and it produces a result. Even if you actually have never experienced it before, it seems to produce a result.
Yep. So
I have a similar experience. Sorry, Andy, I have a similar experience in and around, you know, and Andy's talking about engaging all your senses. And I say this to new hunters when they're coming into it and you're trying to teach them what to look for and those sorts of things. And that one is, for me, if it looks and it feels comfortable to you, it's going to look and feel comfortable to the prey that you're chasing. So if that's on a hot day and you find yourself a cool gully, you know, with a nice little breeze that's coming through, they're going to feel that as well. If it's a cold day and you found a sunny aspect, they're going to feel that as well. But how often you go down and this, all of a sudden everything's perfectly still and nice and comfortable, and the light is soft and it's easy on the eye and all of those sorts of things, you can bet your balls there's going to be animals in there. Yeah. And on the same, someone told me that, and I've always, you're walking up on that situation, you go, oh, hang on a minute, this just feels right. That's all of that going on in your head, and that doesn't escape me.
No, it has real value. But that thing that we talked about right back at the start of the switching between the sides of your brain, that's what that is. So that right-hand side of your brain is taking in your environment as a whole, and the left side, with that space that it's created there, is processing what you know. And as you go hunting and you learn to listen to that little voice of intuition, or whatever you wish to call that, that actually has good overlap into what we should be doing in our other parts of it, in other parts of our life, but we constantly ignore that. So we should learn to listen to that confident voice in your head that says, the deer like native timber, we should look at that. Absolutely you should. And the more time you spend giving your brain the space it needs to do what it needs to do, the better and more attuned you get to listening to it. Tuning out the stuff that's no good, like, that's a bit hard, but that's what mindfulness is all about. It actually gives you an opportunity to say, if I'm spending time looking at what can't be changed, things that make me upset that I'm thinking about from home or in the office or whatever when I'm out hunting, learning to go, well, that's okay to have those things. I'm doing this now and staying attuned to this. That actually gives your brain the time to process that other information and give you the solutions. When we go looking for answers, sometimes you can't find them. And sometimes that's related to how your brain is functioning at the time. But what you guys have both just identified is that when you are doing this activity, you become attuned to taking notice, that's what mindfulness is about, of what's going on and listening to what your instincts are saying. It's really important.
It's really interesting to what you just said then, and what one of the things I've thought about for a long time is that whilst we do as a hunter, you do a lot of very overt and planned activities. So you get as you get older, you get better gear, you get more experience, you go to the range, you do lots of things, you become better attuned to understanding the movement of game. If you hunt an area long enough, you get to understand the actual seasonal components of where you're at and what effect that it has. We do all these activities, and we all these combination of activities. But the reality is there is a component of hunting that we have no control over. And that's the game itself. And I sometimes think that whilst it doesn't sound right from face value, in a way the animals are smarter than us, because they're attuned to existence. And when we go on there, we've got so much baggage with us, it gets in the way to that attuning. A deer doesn't decide, or, a deer doesn't have these kind of questions about, what did the other deer mean 2 weeks ago when it said that thing that kind of hurt my feelings, and so now I've been thinking about that for the last 2 weeks. That's not there. What is there is this animal that has from its inception been concerned with being prey.
Yep.
And animals don't care whether they wake up tomorrow. Right, they're all about now and comfort, and those. And I say that to it's completely sidetracked, but when people are talking about dogs and they get family dogs and they're unwell, and when do I put my dog down and when do I make the call? Well, dogs don't go through their lives trying to understand, or like trying to be the oldest dog in the world or live to a ripe old age. They just want to feel as good or better than yesterday. And if you've got to make a call to go to sleep feeling fantastic, then you've done a good thing for that dog before it gets unwell. I wonder if what you were talking about, though, and we could be stabbing in the dark here, is because that deer or prey or the things that we're talking about don't go through life thinking about yesterday or tomorrow or the argument that I just have. Are they always in this state of mindfulness? Are they always connected? And
Yeah,
because they are so in tune with every sense they've got.
Yes, because they have to be, right? They want to reproduce and they want to make more young, and next week they want to make more young, because who knows when it'll be their last time of making more young. They want to pass on their DNA, and they want to get it done as soon as they can, as quickly as they can, as often as they can. That's what it's all about. So you're actually talking about engaging with life.
Yeah. Well,
hunting makes you engage with life.
Yes, it does.
And all aspects of it.
That's a quote there, isn't it? Because there's a quote that we were talking about just a second ago with animals that comes to my mind by D.H. Lawrence, I think it was, and it's something like I never saw a wild thing sorry for itself. A small bird will drop frozen dead from a brush without ever having felt sorry for itself.
Yep.
And I'm trying to get my mushy feel sorry for myself, worrying about, should I buy a new vehicle in next year or the year after for tax considerations. I'm trying to get that brain in competition with an animal that's never felt sorry for itself. And it's almost in a way, it's an unfair advantage, And, the way that it looks at the world and the way that I look at the world, I have to realize, I think, and that's one of the things you have to realize about hunting, is that you have to actually become more that way in tune rather than the other way. You've got to use your human components to their best ability, and in that situation, it's not about a bigger picture. The big picture is beforehand. When you're there, it's a collapse of that picture. Not tunnel vision, because tunnel vision can actually cause you to see one deer but not see the others, but somehow it's collapsing that into a point of focus. And I suppose, and when I was listening to your description of mindfulness, that's what it is, and it's this point of focus that you're either there or you're not there. And if you're not there, it's pure luck. You may stumble across something, but if you're not there, the chances are that you will stumble on something are very, very limited.
You're right. The idea that hunting makes, even though the perception of hunting is about taking a life, that's misguided. It's actually about engaging fully with life. That animal, like you said, it's a prey animal. They exist in a place where things eat them. And we're not necessarily a prey animal regularly, but I guess we would be in some circumstances. But tuning your senses into hunting actually has real value for us. And engaging at that really primal level where you take notice of the change of the wind and what scent that brings, it's really has real value. So I feel reasonably lucky. My nose works really well. So on hunts I've been on, I've walked across a wind and got a noseful of an animal that might be 100 meters away. I'm going to turn into that wind and I'm going to go and find out what that is. And regularly, I'm successful based on my nose. That's not unheard of. Lots of people do that. But as I've hunted, I've gotten better at making sure I don't ignore what my nose is telling me because it has such positive outcomes. So you're right. They do have a good advantage. They are living in that space. They are very familiar with that space. And their senses are so much better than ours that we have to really get on board as quickly as we can to take in all of that information and use our advantage, which is processing information, making a connection between one thing and another. That's where our strength lies. That's why people adapt. That's why humans are so successful. Our brain is good at making a link between A and B and C, which is not seemingly related, but we get there and we solve issues that way. That's what we get out of it.
So it's almost, this has just come to me, and I can't explain how much I'm enjoying this conversation. A deer is a prey animal, and its whole existence is as a prey animal. So it looks at the world from the point of view of a prey animal. So if you want to be a successful hunter, you need to start looking at the world as a predator, because that's what you are. You've got to be.
And that's okay.
Well, that's it. It's not even. There's not even an okay or not okay component to this. This is not a there isn't a grayness here. If you want to be successful as a hunter, you have to allow yourself to be the predator that you are. Because if you think about it from a binary point of view, you are predacious. You've got the position of your ears, the position of your eyes. We are in the animal kingdom. We are the tortoise. Everything else is the hare. But the thing is, we're a very smart, predacious tortoise. So, we'll figure these things out. So, but I think that's what this, are we getting to that conclusion that if you want to be a hunter and you want to be successful, and in fact, you might want to carry that feeling of success to other things, the acceptance that you are predacious, that you're a predator is probably a big part of that.
Yep. So let's talk about that and expand that a little bit because it's worth unpacking. So new hunters who are perhaps not young, but over their 25th birthday, for instance, who are developing an interest in hunting, may not be secure in their own emotion or conviction that they'll be able to carry out the actual killing act when hunting. So that is a decision point for that person, whether or not they're actually going to take that animal's life and then turn it into food. So for someone on that journey of growth and development, hunting presents you an opportunity to reflect on your motivation, on why are you doing this? What are you hoping to get out of killing that animal? When you've done that, if you choose to go ahead and do that, what are you going to do with it next? So there's a bunch of ethical considerations, there's a bunch of maturity considerations, there's a bunch of decision points that go into the cognitions that get you to the point where you are willing or not willing to take that animal's life. So that reflection on your emotion and your motivation, even if you never end up shooting an animal for food or trophy or whatever, even if you don't do that, you get to the cusp of that and pull back, that still has value because you've reflected on your own existence and your motivations, and your emotional development can only be improved from that reflection.
No matter what you're saying is, no matter where you're at, that's a learning experience.
Absolutely.
Even if the learning is that maybe I'm not predacious, that's a learning experience.
Yep.
And it's interesting you say that because, a number of people over the years have said, look, I want to go hunting, I want to try hunting. And the first thing I say, and they want to talk about gear and where we're going to go and things like that, and allow them the conversation to flow. And the first question I ask you, are you comfortable killing something? And if they go, well, I'm not sure, I said, it's probably not the place to find out then. You need to give that consideration where you want to find that question out, because you don't want to find that question out after you've shot. You need to know the answer to that question before you get in that place, because you can't take it back.
No, And even though that's true, if you do find yourself in that situation, actually there's more to be gained out of that. It has value. Sure, you're going to reflect on that, and that might be a decision maker for you that you'll never, ever, ever hunt again. Yeah. And that's fine. Going through in your life from that point forward, it doesn't all have to be bad. It actually can be really good that you've worked that out, and you might feel bad about taking an animal's life or, whatever. If you have someone with you who is mentoring, they're going to make sure that that animal's not wasted, because that's what I'd be doing, and making sure that that person can talk through that situation, because that's not lost then. It's not a total loss. It's actually an opportunity to get some gain despite the difficulty of that emotion that might arise.
It's an interesting. Does that make sense? No, look, that's an interesting that's an interesting way of looking at it. I suppose from a personal point of view, I probably have wanted them to make that decision beforehand, because I might not want to be in the position to have that conversation with them after they found out,
Yeah, that's right. And I totally agree.
Yeah, I can see that, look, the reality is if you're out with someone hunting and they shot an animal and the animal went down, and, or even the person they were with, it wasn't a clean shot, and the person with them, dispatched it, the actual suffering and all that would be minimized. There would still be obviously opportunities from a hunting point of view for meat, but I suppose from my point of view, I always looked at it and I didn't think about those things, but because I didn't think that was the challenge. I suppose I saw the challenge of how would you have that conversation with someone in that setting once they've made that startling realization that they didn't want to do that after it's done. That would be, I suppose from my point of view, I thought that would be a tough conversation to be having.
Yeah. I would mentor or have mentored 10 to 15 new hunters a year. Right. So I've been in a really great situation to be able to do that, and never has that situation happened. Right? I've been in more than one occasion where we've had a fantastic hunt, an excellent stalk, we've lined up on the animal, and the hunter has said, I'm not going to do this. Right? That's happened, and we've certainly had a conversation after that's happened. And that's positive. That's fine. If they're not comfortable with it, I don't feel like I've missed out on an opportunity because I wasn't the hunter. Right? If you're with a group of people and you're all just trying to get an animal and he takes the lead and he doesn't do it and the group misses out, I can see that some people might, be a bit upset by that. But in a mentor-mentee situation, it doesn't work that way. I've never been concerned about that. The other point that I'll make is never. It's interesting. You talk about the videos and you see stuff and it's sensationalized. And, we're talking about food before and hunting videos and whatever. I've also never been in a situation where a hunter has worked. They've all worked hard enough to get to the animal to start with. A new hunter takes their first deer, and not one of them has got up hooting and hollering. Almost every single one of them, to a man, has put their head down and gone, "Holy shit, that just happened."
Yeah.
Holy shit, that just happened. So the opportunity for a mentor to talk to a mentee and talk through what they're dealing with. And look, I'm not the softest bloke in the world, and I'll slap you on the back and, well done and all those great things. But I'll also ask you how you're feeling. Because usually they then go into a bit of a state of shock and they start to realize what's going on. And if you're there to talk to them about it, they generally get through it pretty well. And I think then the process and care of taking that animal, prepping it, spending quite a few hours getting that thing ready to go home in an esky, on ice, broken down. They see the care that goes into the animal after it's been taken. And I think that helps them rationalize it.
There's a really good point that you're making there, Ian, that I actually have written down in my, massive notes here. It's part of my, selling point for why hunting is important, particularly for younger hunters or younger men, is that if I say the words buck fever, you guys are going to know what that is, because you go hunting and you get excited by the opportunity and the physiological reaction that you have when things get exciting. So if you did your MRI of your brain when someone is dead set anxious versus excited versus angry, the MRI is going to tell you the same picture. They're the same things physiologically. Emotionally, they're very different. So when you take your new hunter and you are mentoring them, going through that process of delivering an opportunity with them to get excited, they're going to have that first surge of adrenaline when they see that animal. They're going to get nervy, excited, shaky, feeling stressed in a positive way when they're lining up to take that shot. With a mentor, that opportunity is a golden opportunity to talk someone through what it's like to deal with panic. It's the same physiology. So you get that benefit of examining this emotion and the physiology of what it feels like with the voice of experience in your ear saying, take a breath, pick a point on that animal, aim small, miss small, go through the process. Are you ready? It's okay. And then when you do take that shot, having that voice of reason and experience to say, actually, that was really good, really well done. How's it feel? Like those are really awesome things to hear from someone who does mentoring, because that's one of the biggest benefits that a younger hunter is going to take away from a successful, when I say successful in this context, I mean a time where they get to take a shot, that as a younger man who may also have anxiety or anger, having someone who can talk you through the physiology of that is a really nice delivery of saying, well, actually, you can now manage what it feels like to get upset in this really positive way. Not by going out shooting, but actually just going through that process of slowing down your breathing, taking that shot, sitting with it until you're ready.
Mm.
So you can see when I talk about mental health, the flow-on effects are clear there.
Yeah, that's right. So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that process is in that particular situation, it's about hunting, but in terms of a control process, it has a benefit well beyond being in a hunting situation. It's in a situation where you're at, for whatever reason, you're at a heightened state of emotion. It's the same control.
That's right.
Again.
You're
That's
saying,
right, but that
it's a really interesting point.
If I'm about to blow my lid at someone for whatever, I just need to go through my shot routine.
That's
without
right.
the rifle.
Yes.
That is a fantastic, because that's really interesting, because
so that's what I get to when I say the idea of using mindfulness in such a positive and beneficial way, all the way down to here's what these serious things feel like under this situation. And a psychologist is going to call that controllable incongruence, right? That's what the term is. So you have this thing that doesn't make any sense because it's not actually real anger, it's actually excitement. It feels the same, and it's safe. So you can, if you learn to manage that well, when you feel yourself elevated in other circumstances, doing your shot routine, great, bring it right down. Say something sensible instead of something you don't really mean because you're upset.
Yeah, that is really quite something, isn't it? I agree with you, Ian. Like I've mentored a number of people, and in fact, that I know I've helped a number of people take their first animal, and I can't think of anyone who was overly, excited in the typical kind of thing you see in a video production. It's actually, it's not solemn, but it's, again, I think what happens is it's the seriousness of it is tends to take over, and I think a lot of people, it's, and some guys have said, job done type thing. Very, very few words, but very, very calm, or not even calm, like a calmness about them, the fact of what they did. So that's quite an interesting way to think about it. And I tell you, I really like that idea of get angry, think about your shot routine. Because you think about, I don't know about you, but I almost have a difficulty of thinking about what happens when I take a shot. That's the difficult thing I find. You know, people say, so what happens when you take a shot? And I said, well, there's a period of time there that I can't actually explain what happens.
Don't remember the noise. I can't remember the impact. I don't remember any of that stuff.
Some pieces for you to explain it.
Yeah.
But the fact that, you know, you kind of go from not ready to scope, rifle up, fire, animal down is kind of this. It's this period of time where there isn't any kind of overt thinking. In fact, you know, I think that's what actually, you know, I say to people, don't overthink it, because that's actually when you can you know, you can miss the shot when you're thinking too much about the shot. Whatever,
sure.
You know, that shot routine, I can't actually explain my shot routine, and that's one of the difficult things I find when I engage with new people who hunt or who want to learn how to shoot. I'm not a bad shot. I'm a competent shot. But when I help people learn to shoot, I actually don't teach them how I shoot, because I don't think I can actually physically or you know, explain how I shoot. It's kind of like I can't actually think about that, but I know the mechanics of a shoot. You know, I know the mechanics of how to take a good shot. I know the structure and all that, and I talk about the structure. But if they ask me, so how do you shoot? I go, I'm not sure I can actually explain that to you, because it's you know, I don't think about that myself overtly, and I know that may be not a great thing, but I don't overtly think about what happens in that process. I can explain it to you from a, you know, like a checkpoint type of idea, or a process point of view. But do I follow that process? Is that what I actually do? I'm not actually sure if I could tell you that or not.
Ian, did you watch that Joel Turner video?
Not yet. It's on the list.
Yeah, take the shot with control no matter what.
Yeah, so it's certainly
it's
in
an
the head,
interesting
because I see it
concept.
every day. Yeah. Before we switch to topics, if you want to see a video of some crazy loon hooting and hollering because he managed to shoot a deer, that's my YouTube video. Andy's standing next to me in New Zealand, and I wasn't hooting and hollering because I shot a deer. I was hooting and hollering because the trip was just so amazing and so successful, and that was just a part of it. But I looked like the biggest gumboot you've ever seen on a video, because I was elated at that point for all of us. But anyway, I digress. Switching topic.
It was great.
It was a very, very good experience.
And I think that's important to say. If you do hoot and holler, that's what you do. But I you know,
normally don't, mate. I'm not that guy.
Well,
that's it. That day.
I know that you know, I certainly feel a sense of elation when I've helped people do that. And in fact, again, in that idea of the progression as a hunter, is that I probably at times feel more elation when that works out for someone else than I do for myself. It's, you know, at a certain level, it's not that I'm disconnected to it, but I have certainly a different feeling when I do it, when I see someone else achieve it. That's certainly, you know, and that's a big. There's actually a little video that I put together with a friend, you know, and after he's taken a shot, you know, we're just joking, and I'm really happy that he's put that together. You know, I'm happy that it's worked out for him. So yeah, it's an interesting combination of emotions and approaches that we're talking about. Who would have thought that going out and chasing deer would be so complicated?
Yeah, but that's
think
right,
about it too much.
What happened? I thought I was doing it to get away from it all, but hang on. What I'm doing is I'm pursuing it all. I'm trying to get it all together.
Yes. And I guess that's the thing, right? So taking that idea of spending time looking to the future, but that's a key element of good mental health. If you are making plans, you're in a good space. If you've got something to look forward to, you're in a good space. If you're learning something new, you're in a good space. So if you're keeping physically fit and hanging out outside with friends, you're feeling connected to others, you're in a good space. So all of those, if you read any kind of thing about mental health and how we implement better mental health in our community, those things are all on the list of how to do it. Hunting gives you that.
Wow, that's a really insightful way to look at it, isn't it? to think that Nundle Deer Camp was actually, it's that valuable for you. Whereas I thought it was just a good laugh. Yeah. So
and it's that too.
And you were saying, talking about moving to another topic. I think one of the great strengths of what we've discussed tonight is that for I know it's, this is only talking from myself, but I'm sure it's the same for a lot of people, is that what you've described is giving a name to what a lot of people feel.
Yep, that's right.
People, this is asking someone why they hunt is an incredibly difficult. Well, it's not a hard question to ask. It's an incredibly difficult answer to get any kind of answer out of, because some people just kind of go, or we say these kind of throwaway lines. Oh, I do it for the food, or and not to say that none of those things are important. They are, but you kind of have a feeling that for a lot of people, that's just allows them to describe it rather than actually answer it. I often think that's one of the problems we get into when we proactively try to promote hunting, is that we try to find a reason that's kind of sensible, like, it's good for the environment, we're reducing we kind of go through all those kind of things, and most of us kind of go, yeah, I do those things, but that's not why I'm there. I'm not been to you, and I'm not a wildlife warrior. I might be a wildlife warrior, but that's not what I'm thinking I am. I'm not that. Well, I'm actually, if you want to kind of rip this all away, I'm a hunter, and I'm doing what hunters do, and that's how I hunt. And I think that's a really, it's hard to actually describe that, but some of the things that you've spoken about, I think, describe that, especially that idea of that it brings everything together for you, rather than give you, a thought pattern that you can't answer. It actually provides you with a hell of a lot of answers, because it brings out everything together. And what was it you called it? Is when you bring both sides of the brain together?
Oh, you mean when they function individually, like separately?
No,
lateralization.
Lateralization, when you actually, you kind of, you're using the both sides for what their design purpose are.
Yeah.
In a real situation, rather than an opaque made up situation, like a simulation.
That's right. For me, if you want to be a psychologist who does psychological interventions for people, there is a space for people who want to sit on a couch and talk about stuff. Go for it. For some people, that's what they've got. That's what works. No worries. That's not me. It doesn't work for me. I can do it as a job, and I'll be successful for some of those people, but taking that opportunity and delivering it outside in a manner that gives us all of the benefits of hunting without necessarily hunting for mental health purposes, that's where the action is for me. I enjoy that process of getting someone to the point where they are competently able to find their way through the scrub, look at things, see things they couldn't see before, teach them how to use their eyeballs properly, teach them how to get their ears tuned in, get them to the point where they can actually engage well with the environment, probably for some people the first time ever. Seeing that, you have that saying where people can't see the forest for the trees. So when you go hunting, heaps of people look at trees. You got to teach your brain to let your eyes slide past the obvious and to see past all of that. And that takes a bit of time and skill and awareness. So that building of that, like, that's an opportunity for people. And it's the same thing. Like, if you're going to be stuck in a room doing psychology practice with someone, like, that's really limiting, I think. This is an opportunity to take it all outside and get the benefit, because your brain is more receptive. You ever been hunting with someone who you knew was having some sort of issues at home, but they won't talk about it? You put them in a situation where they're engaged properly with their environment, they don't shut up. They just talk.
I was about to say, there has to be a conversation in the next round of this where we talk about the campfire itself, because in this pursuit, all different people from all walks of life, even in our little close circle, your profession, my profession, You know, we've got people that are in the medical, quite a few people that are in health, actually. And then you've got, you know, some truck drivers, and you've got some mechanics, and you've got people like that. But when they're in the bush, you know, when they've got their cams on, or when they've finished their hunt and we're sitting around a campfire and we're having a beer or a whiskey or a cup of tea, it doesn't matter, and the lights are dim, what your social stature was in your other life don't mean shit over here.
Well, that's it.
You know, it's all laid a bit bare,
Deer
isn't
don't,
it? And you
deer don't care. The deer don't care. And
No,
that's it. I think that's what it is. The interesting thing you said there about the fact that, you know, they don't, some people don't shut up. I think about that because I hunt, you know, I hunt with a lot of different people, and you know, and a lot of people you meet are dealing with challenges, you know, I wouldn't say they have mental health issues, but they're dealing with issues around mental health, or issues that are associated with mental health. And some won't shut up to the point where you go, mate, you've got to shut up, okay? Everyone can hear you. Everything can hear you. You've got to stop talking, okay? Which is okay, because you kind of just go, mate. But I know that other people, I've seen it with other people, if they aren't able to let that go, it actually basically wrecks their time. And I've always wondered that, and you'll have experienced this, Ian. Some people turn up to go hunting and they never come back, and I wonder if what happened was they weren't in the right headspace, and the natural world said, sorry, no free ride here, and they went, okay, I'm not supposed to be there. There's a couple of people I know who just, or more than a couple, who come and they've gone, and it's too hard for them in a way. And you wonder, is it the where they're at in their headspace? It hasn't helped them concentrate. It's actually, you know, it's actually kind of set up a flag for them to say, you're not right. You know, it's a test, and this is telling you, as you said before, you know, that the learning experience is, you need to have a better headspace if you want to have a crack at this, because you're not in the right headspace.
There's something in that, and I think that one thing that people who are dealing with challenges or not dealing with challenges but are resilient and are able to sit with their thinking, actually that's what it is. Some people can't sit with their thinking.
Yes.
Hunting and spending time in that environment, whether you're hunting or taking photos or just bushwalking or whatever, if your brain has its opportunity, it's going to do thinking. And if you are not able to guide your attention to stay focused on what you're doing, your brain is going to deliver your story to you over and over and over. So sitting with your own thinking actually has real value. We need to be able to do that. If you are struggling, you often can't do that, so you want to make it go away. So if you go hunting and you discover that you can't sit with your thinking, you're not going to go hunting again.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to that idea of sitting down thinking. The way I describe it professionally is like, I'll be working with a client, and you know, they're kind of going over a series of bad decisions, and I'll say to them, you know, if you make a good decision, do you listen to yourself? And they say, yep. And I said, if you make a bad decision, do you listen to yourself? And they kind of go, no, I try to get back to the good decision. I said, well, think about it this way. One is evidence of an outcome. The other is evidence of the outcome. One evidence you're accepting, one evidence you're not accepting, but it's still evidence, you know. If you make a decision, it's the bad outcome, that's evidence. You need to be able to deal, and as you said, as you describe it, you need to be able to sit with that and kind of go, that's evidence. I need to accept it as evidence and move from that point, rather than kind of find some way to reevaluate that evidence to turn it into a positive, rather than say, okay, that evidence is telling me the reality of the situation. And maybe that's what it is, that they can't deal with the evidence that's being presented in front of them. The natural world is saying, the natural world is presenting them with evidence, and they go, yeah, I don't like that evidence, I want to think about it some other way. And no, it's there, you know.
Yes.
It's an interesting
I'm just going to
Yeah, I think that's it. I think we've got a couple more sessions here, but let's for this one, let's think about how do we let's kind of close tonight on the idea of the value of that campfire and what that provides.
Yeah. So something I was quite keen to get out that'll lead into that, and that's we have a lot of people come to the ADA, is a great way for people to engage, get together, and do stuff. But I find a lot of people they come to our branch to try and get an experience that they've heard of from somebody else. So a friend of a friend will tell them about an amazing thing that we've done, and they had a great time, and they want to get a piece of that. My work, for example, is very similar. I'll talk about what I've done on my weekend, and people take me aside and say, man, if I could just get an experience like that in my life, I would be so happy. And they're not talking about the hunting. They're just talking about the experience itself. So back to the point before about, the right people in the right frame of mind and those that come up that really want to talk. I'm very careful now about asking what their motivations are when they want to join, because I reckon more of them don't want to hunt, but they want an adventurous pursuit, and they want some men's camaraderie. They want some time to talk to blokes. They might not voice that straight away, but man, some of these trips we go on, there's a lead up to it around fitness and what have you. And we might start climbing Tabletop Mountain in Toowoomba every morning, leading up to it. And man, someone I've never even met before came along on those. And within 2 trips up and down the hill, they were spilling everything that was going on in their lives. They just wanted someone to talk to. And I find that really interesting. What I found the most interesting, though, is the campfire, leading into that as a bit of a conversation. When the light is dull and people have, they're back from whatever they're doing and they're relaxing, and that 3-day effect we spoke about, it might not come out on the first day, but I guarantee that you're knowing a whole lot more about the group that you're with on day 3, because you have some very interesting conversations, and people come along to those, and at the end of it they go, man, that was almost my favorite part of the trip, sitting around the campfire with the guys, because they got to air some of the things that were going on in their lives, and they got to realize that they were pretty normal because everyone else had similar stuff going on. Yes. We're all blokes of our current age, and that's what happened. But it'd be good to understand more about that, Andy, and why that happens in that scenario and not in others, and how helpful that is for fellas.
Yeah, so, I think it's a really good point, mate. I think that is that that it's not just about the campfire. It's that moving towards what that is and what that means for people, that they're moving towards this thing. I know that, for instance, I haven't been a Nundle for a long time. I haven't been a Nundle since not my kids were born, but I haven't had, because that's school holidays and it's just a bad time of the year for me to be away. But the first times I went to Nundle, I went for about 4 or 5 years in a row. There was a guy used to come local. He was from Scone. He was the local, and he used to bring his son. And he didn't hunt. He used to just bring with him. And he said to me, "I just bring my son so my son can be around. He can be in this environment." And he said, "I want to be in this environment, but I also want my boy to be exposed to this environment, because this is not happening in my, it's not happening in our life back at Scone type thing, or wherever it was." And I thought that was, that was really, it was eye-opening that he would he would do that because he saw the value in what was happening there. And I remember one time I was. Here's the joke part of it. I was fleshing out a pig skull, and I was talking to the young guy, the son, about it as I was doing it. So I was showing him how to do it, and I hit 3 fingers with the knife, and I opened myself right up, and I just looked at him and said, "Yeah, just don't worry about that, mate." And I just stood there, or sat there on the log for a couple of minutes, just with my fist closed, blood pouring out of it, while just going, "What's your dad up to? Go see what your dad's up to." You just
let me swear in the corner.
it's interesting, mate. Yeah, just kept the conversation going as my fingers are hanging off. But yeah, it was interesting, that he saw the value in that for his kid. And it was he would I think he used to tie in with Adrian. He's literally say, look, when are you guys going to be there? Because that's when we'll come. And I was always really impressed that that's what he wanted to do, and that was the value he got out of that. And he didn't have a conversation with everyone the rest of the year. It was just that time that he would go and meet these guys from Queensland and sit around the campfire with them.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I'll tell you another interesting thing that really throws me about the campfire. For a number of years, I used to be a venture leader. So, kids between 14 and 18. And just here in the local area. And, I live in a gap, so we got lots of scrubland around. And all those kids wanted to do was light fires and sit around and talk, because they had busier lives than most adults. Like Monday was ballet and Tuesday was cello and Wednesday was debating society and Thursday was the environment club. So Friday was Ventures, where they used to go down, which was run by the crazy bloke who used to like lighting fires. And when you go through scouting, they kind of talk about lesson plans and all this stuff. And so I got there and we'd had the flag ceremony. We waved the flag and I said, what are you doing? They go, I want to light fires. Off you go. And they just literally light fires and talk to each other around the fire for 3.5 hours. Because we used to go from 7:30 to 11, and they would just sit there and talk to themselves. And they were kids at 16, because they just wanted to be in that environment. So it's an interesting concept.
It is, actually. So you said scouts, so they were blokes?
No, girls
Mixed?
and guys. So Venturers was Scouts itself is now
open.
Whatever, open to both girls and boys, and Venturers is young women and young men. So and both. There wasn't both the young women and the young men wanted to light a fire, look at it for about half an hour, and then just start talking about stuff.
Yep. So that's a big topic, and I think I have information that might help understand why that's so. Because, why is it so is a good question to ask. And I really only came across a fairly, a firm answer for that today. So I'm not across it yet, but I get the idea, and it's related to the same thing that goes on when you go hunting with your eye movement. But the idea of that nice feeling that you get after spending a couple of days hunting with fellas and sitting around that campfire towards the end of the sort of hunt or whatever, you're right. Something goes on there for us that feels good. It's a nice thing to do, and people do tend to talk and disclose and feel relaxed. I would suspect that there's a fair bit of neurological activity there that's influenced by our hormones, things like serotonin and other neurochemicals that are at play that help us feel content, safe, connected to other people. You'll remember earlier on I said things like when you activate the right side of your brain positively, you have greater feelings of empathy. You feel more connected to others. One other part to that makes sense that's also true is that when your right side of your brain is stimulated in that way, it makes you more open to different opinion. So you're more likely to learn or take a perspective of someone else when you're in that state. So your ability to relate to others is less guarded. So it actually, research would say that is really positive, particularly for men who may or may not have more guarded sort of engagements with others through the course of their normal life. Does that make sense? So that post-activity lull in heightened sort of guardedness could be really easily explained by neurochemicals and that idea that our brain is more receptive to other people's opinions about things. We learn more. We're open to others more in those circumstances. Coupled with the idea of what the firelight's doing and what your eyes are doing when it's looking at the fire, I think I need to understand that part better, because there's something in that I think I need to learn more about, based on science, not just gut feeling.
Well, Cormac McCarthy said the flames, no, I remember this one, I had to look it up. The flames soared in the wind and the embers paled and deepened like a blood beat of some living thing. By the way, Cormac McCarthy doesn't use punctuation, so this is one long sentence. Things that eviscerate upon the ground before them, and they watch the fire, which does contain with it something of men themselves, in so much as they are less without it and are divided from its origins and are exiles. For each fire is all fires, and the first fire and the last ever to be.
Probably written by a fire.
Yeah. I think I'd have to read that 2 or 3 times to
You have to read that
understand
about 1,500 times, mate. Yeah, that's one of the things about McCarthy's books. But that was it. The idea that when you look into a fire, you're looking into the first fire as well as the last fire. It's an internal thing. So is that why, we call it the bush TV and all that thing? When you're looking at it, you're looking at something.
So isn't that the idea then that we actually feel really connected to who we are and where we come from?
Yes.
In that moment. And that sense of connection, actually, to take it back, is also an indicator of good mental health. If you feel connected to who you are, it doesn't get any better.
So, or even you feel connected to things that are beyond you.
Yeah. Yep.
I heard that when I go hunting and I immerse myself in nature and I feel like I've been successful, that I'm a nicer bloke to everybody else.
Yes.
Because I can hear and I'm more open to what it is that they're going through. So I should hunt often, and maybe I should try.
Yeah. So I suppose to bring tonight's conversation to a close, but by no means close the invitation for you to return, Andy, and I think that's almost going to be a standing order now. It's like the Vegas show, mate. You're booked out for the next 5 years. So in that, I think the rambling conversation that we've managed to cobble together here tonight, if I was to surmise it, is that whereas we tend to look at outdoor activity as being a singular thing, what you've almost said is that hunting in itself is this combination of so many parts of your brain. So it's not you don't hunt from one part of your brain. In fact, what you're doing is you're hunting from all parts of your brain, and that's why you get that feeling that's almost indescribable when you hunt, because it might be the few times in your life when all these things are actually firing together as they should do, and it kind of makes you, I suppose, wonder, did more primitive times actually have a much clearer and a happier brain than we have today, because they were kind of in this space more often. So certainly from me, this has been a really eye-opening thing. So I suppose I'll throw it over to you to bring us to close. Is there anything you'd like to close with, or any other snippet of information you can drop that'll keep me up tonight while I'm trying to think about what you meant? So let's hear it.
Look, okay, there is actually one thing that I didn't talk about at all tonight, and there's a heap of research about the benefits to your executive function. So spending time in a natural setting, whether you're hunting, bushwalking, taking photos, whatever, it's restorative to your decision making. So there's this theory called attention restoration theory, and it's actually very interesting. And the premise would be that if you were working in a position where you were making a bunch of executive function decisions regularly, it depletes your ability. You get tired doing that. And what spending time in a natural environment does, even as little as 15 minutes, it restores that ability. So it means you're making better decisions. not necessarily hunting decisions or photographic decisions or your reason for being in nature, but actually complex decision making in your workplace will improve as a side effect, consequence, direct result of spending time in nature. And hunting does it better than the others as far as I can see. I could be wrong, but that's how it appears to me.
Wow. So how do we get a an employment contract that has, you know, for the benefit of this organisation? I'm going hunting.
Well, actually, I presented that to the CEO of the Toowoomba Hospital and got approval. No, I didn't. I was joking. It's all right.
Last
The
word.
benefits are many. The benefits are many, and we should all spend time outside, physically moving around and engaging in that environment with intent to benefit from it. Because we will.
I think that's not a bad place to end. Anything from you, good Ian?
Jump any of that. Nope, I'm going to leave it as it is. I wrote down one thing. Hunting engages me with life, and that might go on a t-shirt.
Yep,
It's a great statement that you made earlier, and everything we've spoken about draws back to that. So
I've got it written down here, Ian. It's
it's
the snippet of truth out of a great big summary that I wrote a year ago.
So
no, that's awesome, mate. I really appreciate you coming on. I can't wait to have you back to have another round at this, or two more rounds at least. I think everyone that listens to it will get a lot from it. So thanks again, and
No worries.
we'll wrap it up tonight. And yeah, we'll talk to you all on the next one.
Radio. Thanks, fellas.
thank you.
No worries.